ZCO Consulting.
Dick Trainison, my Forest Cup Bar.
John Weddleton.
Sharon Easley.
And folks in the audience.
Ken Franco, SAP Program Manager.
Wayne Willis, SAP.
Rose Foley, Friendly Budget Analyst. Elizabeth Sid, Municipal Light and Power.
Thank you. Mr. Burson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is our July report. The agenda is fairly standard. We'll cover the same things that we've been covering every month in terms of the position of the project, basically on the various different status reports that you receive or hear about. The little discussion about project governance, the running cost, project cost, and some, an update to our critical success factors, and as well as an outlook on the project.
Can we pause for a moment? For the record, I'd like to recognize Mr. Peterson has joined us. Thank you. Please continue.
So in terms of the weekly status report, the project management office meets every week on a Wednesday, and this is sort of the base document that's presented. And we just wanted to highlight for you some things. I mean, you'll notice that the major functional teams are in pretty good shape. I mean, they're basically reporting themselves as being in a green condition. But however, in these areas of the MOA, interface, data cleansing, and data migration, first of all, you'll see that they started relatively late, so there wasn't any reporting on their activities early in the project. And then, if you start looking at the back end, it's a little more worrisome. They are all reporting yellow condition as opposed to green. And then there are some question marks there that, there was a foul-up, I guess, in terms of getting the information regarding the progress of the interface team this particular week. That's the one question mark that's there. They did actually get that there at the meeting, but that was what was reported. And data migration, is starting quite late, and that's worrisome. So we wanted also for you to see where the relationship is to the reports that you formally receive, from the project team and how it relates to the weekly reporting of the PMO. This is a page that you receive in your monthly report from the project team. We thought it might help you a little bit to chat how to interpret what's actually on that report. And so we have already said that the functional aspects, the SAP subject matter expert aspects are running along fairly well. So all of their line items are showing that they're in pretty good shape. And those red bars are where they're supposed to be. And again, what we're seeing here is the areas where the municipality is providing resources are not doing as well. Okay, they are not doing as well. They are behind. And not only that, the green portion up here is indicating what was actually accomplished in the prior week. Not only are these areas not doing well as far as the resources that are being provided by the municipality, they're not showing much progress either. That's concerning.
Mr. Training?
Alden, why?
With regards to those interfaces and those kind of things, well, as Zig talked about, I think data cleansing, conversion, and migration all got off to a late start, so they're playing catch up. We're struggling, I think, a little bit to understand how to clean the data, what the expectations are. Obviously, we have not worked with back office before. They have a methodology, a standard. We've gone through this multiple times in multiple different iterations, so people are keeping track of things outside of PeopleSoft, and how we're going to integrate those things. So we've had a lot of those discussions. So I just think right now we're starting late, and the fact that we have a lot to do is why we're behind. And then with regards to interfaces, we've been having a lot of meetings on that. There's a large volume of that. There's been a couple of additional things that have been approved by the Assembly recently, team budget and the power plan. Those have interface implications as well. So there's some work that needs to be done, and they're waiting for some of those upgrades to happen so that the interfaces can be done. Most of these tend to be muni resources, which I think we've been pretty open all along, was concern that we had, and finding the right people and trying to be able to task them into the right areas that we're doing. So We're working on it. I think it's a fair representation of where we're at. I also think that we don't try to take an overly rosy picture of our obligations, so we wouldn't come in green just to show everybody that we're green. So
Is there anything we need to do from our perspective to help you guys accomplish this? I just don't want to get further behind. I've seen that before.
yeah, and certainly SAP is concerned about it as well, and I think I've been very honest from day one. I think when I started here, my two biggest concerns were interfaces and data cleansing as being the two biggest Muni responsibilities that we may be hampered with. I think a lot of work has been done in the past, and I think what we really need to do is leverage that work into the new SAP back office kind of tools and methodology. And if we can find a good way of using that past work into implementing and saving us time, I think we'll have an opportunity to catch up in some of those areas. And Ken, you were in the interface meeting today, so you could probably speak. We have a weekly interface meeting, so just speak to I mean, we are behind on interfaces, but what was basically the general outcome of do they feel comfortable?
Well,
Is
no,
there anything they're worried about?
As Alden mentioned, there's a lot of work that's been previously done on interfaces that they're going to be leveraging, and a lot of their facts of being behind or waiting for functional specs to develop the interfaces, so the documentation with the requirements to develop the net new interfaces. So we did have new work got approved about 3 weeks to a month ago, what we call the net new, as far as new work. And so that's now coming online, and you're seeing that we're running a little bit behind on having to catch up and get up to speed to do that development.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Trainer.
Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Dunbar.
I have two questions, one of which is, perhaps both are a function of being relatively new to this, but when you say interface development, do you mean the way that our employees interact with the system?
No, what we're referring to is that, let's say we have a life insurance vendor, we have a medical insurance vendor, we have 401k, 457 vendors, we have our assets in Maximo, our police people are on telestaff, teledriver, those other systems that are out there within the municipality that have to feed information into SAP. That's an interface with another system, not the personal interface between a person and the system.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, who has primary responsibility for interface development?
That's a very good question. It's actually a multi-part question. There's interfaces go both ways sometimes. Sometimes you need information out of SAP to take back to these other systems. SAP is responsible for the outs, going out of SAP into these other ones and developing the interfaces out. We, the municipality, are responsible to get the ones that we use from our vendors going the other direction. And then we have to kind of meet in the middle, and then we go from there.
Sorry, to be a little more clear, on the MOA side, who is the individual person? Who is the human being who has primary responsibility for interface development?
So it's a team. So we have a project manager lead in the IT department named Doug Miller. However, the way it works out is that MLP, AWU, they will be responsible for their development of their interfaces in the Muni. So it's actually a cadre of people. That's why this interface team that we have has 15 to 20 people in it from a variety of different things. They will all be responsible for their interfaces, and this is our meeting where we get everybody together every week to keep the things moving. But there's a large number of people, and in the end, it'll work out to each individual department will be responsible to help with their interfaces to get them out.
Mr. Weldon?
Just following up on that is, we approved Tuesday over $1 million for MLMP to do, I guess, their interface.
Power plant.
And, which is shocking. Is that what we're looking at for integration? Is every little department of like?
Well, that's a good question. Team budget was approved the prior meeting as well. That was the one for the OMB department. I think those are big systems with the big exceptional thing. I would not expect to see that as a normal, ongoing basis. Most of the other interfaces are either done and ready to go, or are much smaller in line of that. These are not just being done because of SAP. Both of these are being done because of upgrades to their underlying software. But when they upgrade it, a lot of times there's different schema and everything that they build in those upgrades. That's what has to be then changed on the interface, because what was there before won't necessarily work 100% with the new system.
So, once SAP is all done this time next year, and then they upgrade again?
There will always be, in and this is, and you weren't here, Mr. Wilton, for this, but this is when we went with Kava, if you might have heard it, with regard, which is our time and attendance system, and that was one of the reasons we went with Kava, because they have a relationship with SAP that whenever one of those change, we don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, all of these ones, anytime there's a change between a vendor or what we want from the vendor and or SAP, it will require interface development, and that falls back on, or will fall back on the IT department to make those changes. So all those interfaces have to be continually monitored, and that's why we try to minimize the number of interfaces, because they have to be developed and tested, and it takes a lot of money on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilton. Please continue.
Sure. This particular chart is one that you see every month that comes from the team, and the idea is to try to show you where the project is. The thing I think I wanted to highlight for you is that, in essence, that yellow line up there, which represents, there it is, that yellow line represents the development activities that are going on right now. It's called realization. As you can see, it's about halfway. From a calendar perspective, it's about halfway. So, but we need to recognize that this thing started in 4/11. The report date is 7/22. Realization is scheduled to end 10/28, give or take a week. If all is well, progress should match the calendar progress of 50%, 14 weeks divided by 28 weeks. Well, the progress of the project is not reporting 50%, it's reporting less than 50%. Question becomes, overall, are you behind or are you not behind? I think you are. Okay, and you need to be addressing and attacking that. Okay, in terms of trying to maintain pace and trying to meet your ultimate target dates. The team reported these following two risks, and they basically reinforce what I've been trying to say to you without a doubt, and I certainly reinforce them as well. The interfaces, there's a risk that the interfaces will not be complete when it's time to start integration testing. First system integration test mid-October. That's the risk. Well, it is close, more and more it's becoming more like an issue as opposed to a risk. And action will probably need to be taken. Otherwise, what's going to happen is a month from now, somebody's going to say, we can't get done, let's defer it, let's delay. I mean, that would be my projection. Okay? There's still a concern over the technical connection to HEC. Every technical issue seems to have been worked out reasonably well and on a timely basis. So those do not seem to be the drop-dead kind of concerns for the project. But notice that data cleansing, again, is a risk. And the team recognizes it. Yes, sir.
That means.
Ken, what's HEC mean?
It's a HANA Enterprise Cloud. So it's basically, it's a hosting environment. HANA is the underlying database. It's an in-memory database.
Our system is residing in Santa Clara right now in that environment.
That was an interesting discussion a year ago. Any questions on that?
Doesn't look like it. Please continue.
Okay. Well. Okay, so weekly, the Executive Steering Committee receives a dashboard, a weekly update from the team. And, in the past, what I was doing is I was kind of giving you a copy of that dashboard. It had the green, it had the stoplight metaphor on there. Well, we want to give you some highlights here as we start looking at multiple reports over several weeks. So data cleansing was, as an issue, a concern, was first raised the week ending 6/3. And it has been mentioned every week since then, and the only change is that it's behind schedule. So data cleansing has been behind schedule since 6/3, okay? Organization change management, is kind of interesting. It seems to be flopping every week in this report. One week it's ahead of schedule, and next week it's behind schedule. I find it interesting that it's flopping back and forth. As far as the enterprise content management solution, which is open text, okay, the reporting about that to the Executive Steering Committee started out saying, okay, we have 3 workshops that have to be conducted. The workshops were conducted. Those were all on payables, purchasing, and HR. Okay, those 3 workshops were conducted. And then we had a string of reports that continually said, follow-up is needed. What's happened? Nothing, to my knowledge.
Well, we've had 20 more meetings.
Okay, well, then, I don't know why we're saying that, you know? Okay? The interface team meets weekly. That's reported every week. The interface team meets weekly. Yet if you go back to those progress reports and you start looking for, well, what kind of progress is the interface team making, doesn't report any progress. Doesn't report that it's getting anything done. It's just meeting every week.
One comment before you continue, or question.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Theron, would you like to respond to each part, or do you want to wait till we get to the end to do?
Sometimes you give it to me at the end and I don't remember it, so on some of these it might be beneficial if we did it on
Okay, so if you just
slide by
recognize
slide.
the chair when you're ready
I
to
will.
ask a
I'm
question,
sorry.
that would be great. No, thank you. Please continue.
Okay, so one of the things in the dashboard that's presented to the Executive Steering Committee is the very top portion of it talks about schedule. And typically it has been reporting that schedule is in a green condition and has been for quite a while. However, I find it interesting that the following line items indicate that they're behind schedule in that report. Yet the bottom line says everything is okay, it's green. The report that you receive on a monthly basis, the very first few lines of that report are reflected up here, and you can see those. Okay?
Excuse me, you're referring to the report that we received from Mr. Theron?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Those are the first 3 lines that show up on that report. First 4 lines, excuse me. What I've done is I've said, okay, well, if this is what you received in July, and then what did it say in June and what did it say in May? So we have a comparison, if you will, of those 3 reports. The thing that we need to pay attention to is, the overall progress right here says, as of July, the July report, you're 27% complete. Yet calendar-wise, you're only going through, you're supposed to be 50% complete. Okay? I would be concerned. I would be concerned. Since the project team's reports are now through July, this is just repeating what I just said. I mean, we're basically showing we're 25% complete, and yet calendar-wise, we really ought to be closer to 50. Okay? And, you're doing an awful lot of historical kind of information, so your reports are, I think, like, for instance, gathering information about the MOA charges is a month in arrears. Those kinds of things are happening, and so you're not really getting as current information as you probably could, especially since the ESC and the PMO are basically presenting their reporting on a weekly basis. Let's talk a little bit about project governance. The project organization chart indicates that there's supposed to be a data services team. Now this gets into some of this, all this business about data cleansing, data migration, data conversion, all data related. There's supposed to be a team, okay? There's supposed to be, and has been on the weekly run rate, there is a position that's been out there for almost 6 months that talks about needing a senior project manager for data services. That's supposed to be an SAP person. That never seems to have been filled. The solution appears to be back office as being the organization that's going to pay attention to all of the data-related activities. However, the concern I have is they tend to focus on moving things from PeopleSoft to SAP, and there are quite a few pieces of data out there that are not in PeopleSoft, and the question becomes, how does that get moved into SAP? Well, if you had someone who was responsible, accountable for all the data activities, then presumably that would be addressed.
I have a question to Mr. Theron. So what
information both at the utilities as well as that the Muni is in. Excel is in, access databases, spreadsheets, things that were never incorporated into the system. And actually, Ms. Ziv would probably be better than I would be. But there's a ton of information out there, unfortunately, that is probably needed and used on a daily basis. And the big problem we're going to have is how do we gather that information along with the PeopleSoft data to put it into the new SAP so we don't have these ancillary systems out there in the future.
I get it now, there's shadow files.
Lots
Like
of them.
with PeopleSoft, when we first implemented PeopleSoft, there were tons of shadow files, so I understand.
And you'll notice I've listed it down here at the very bottom, utility assets, grants, and projects. Because project data was one of the downfalls a year and a half or so ago when everybody was going through the testing and so forth and couldn't get they didn't have all the project data. I mean, it was causing quite a concern. And so it needs to be redone. We need to recognize that.
Thank you. Ms. Whittle?
So following up on that, is there a core thing where SAP could function for most of the municipality, but the enterprise units aren't connected quite yet? We're okay, we just do that over
Well,
over time, or
we're
it's
trying to
all
bring,
done?
this is an all or nothing kind of situation. We're bringing all on, and we've even had, there are discussions of bringing the HCM on at a different time than the Philo side. But the decisions were made before, and I think, as you saw, we're pretty well green on most of the core functional areas. So our goal would be able to do that. I mean, as you've seen here, the project is doing very well. What we have our backlog are some of the ancillary things that feed into it, either the data that feeds into it and or the interfaces that feed into it. And that also is what's having an impact, because those are all sub-plans of the master plan. So when Zig is talking about we need to be at 50%, that doesn't mean that when you take the 5% and we're behind on interfaces, that factors into that percentage and brings it back. That doesn't mean that the core functional areas of HCM, Philo, and so forth aren't doing better than the total. But it's a composite of all the work streams that we have going on at this time.
But if it's all or none,
You are absolutely, that is the problem as the sponsor. Any link, the whole system will have a problem. Yes, I am very aware of that. We've had some, sometimes the interfaces, and the other thing is if you bring bad data in, how's that going to, so you're absolutely correct. Every one of those work streams, that's why they're listed there separately, is a critical factor to the success of this program. And we're trying to manage all of those things at once.
The other thing that, certainly we're trying to do is we're trying to maintain the visibility about those line items, because we will continue to talk about each one of those line items.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
So, Zig, you just partially answered my question, but again, this question is a function of myself and John being new to this. And I apologize if you answered this question in prior meetings as well, but when you're giving us these reports, what is the sort of practical effect? You say that we need this senior PM, or he hasn't been hired. What are we supposed to do with that information? Is that in there for us to try to pressure someone or pass something, or is it basically
Pressure me.
We're kind of an audience, and really this is just going to you? That's sort of my question. Now I know there's some recommendations at the end here that I read ahead and saw that, but practically speaking, as we go through here, what kind of actions should we be thinking about? What we should be doing, if anything?
What has occurred in the past, and yes, you're absolutely right. You're my client. Okay, the administration is not my client. And that's on purpose so that I can maintain an independence, if you will. But certainly in these sessions, when the assembly agrees with something that I might suggest, then it becomes fairly easy to look straight at the project sponsor, the executive sponsor, and say, what are you going to do about it? That seems to have been what has worked in the past. Certainly, I comment to all of these individuals that I work with on the project individually and very privately. But sometimes it takes a little bit of suggestion from the assembly.
And if I might add something, because Dick and I have been in this for a really long time. But anyway, what I also see happening at our meetings is the sponsor, if you will, Mr. Thurn, voluntarily makes suggestions on what plans to do about it. And if that doesn't happen, if somebody wants to follow up, please feel free to do so. Thank you. Please continue.
Sure. And certainly, to kind of close the loop on that, there may be times when the only answer becomes, we need to spend more money. Okay, I mean, and if that's the case, I think he needs to know that maybe, you've already heard that, okay? Because clearly, if you start talking about additional SAP personnel, you're going to be talking about more money.
And I'll make another comment, since you mentioned money, okay? The current administration is, or has been committed to not spending more than what we've already appropriated.
Delayed implementation.
Right. And I think the administration, those who aren't here, and all the representative administration, recognize we get to a point where they just need to, approach us for additional funding, that we're going to do it. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. So I just wanted to remind you, ECM, we mentioned that earlier, Enterprise Content Management. There is a team that's working on getting open text operating. So that's a good thing. Just want to let you know, because earlier in the project they were not there. All right, so it's good that that's happening.
I want to speak to open text, since Zig brought it up a little bit earlier here. The open text meeting started, and it became very obvious immediately, right off the bat, that the functional teams, and you mentioned the 3 departments, needed a lot more training sessions, a lot more development, a lot more discussions, and the 3 meetings has literally gone to 20 to 30 meetings, and they've been having those things to educate and develop and so forth. That caused the status of the project obviously not to progress as fast, but we want to make sure we do it right, no matter how much it takes to get those departments, because those 3 departments are going to be the ones that are going to train the next departments when we start rolling this out, and we want them to understand how it was developed and what goes into that place and all those kind of things. So very critical component there. The other thing is it's fortunate or unfortunate, open text is just it's its own stream, but it is a component of the big thing. So being late is not, while it's not optimal, it's not a critical factor that's causing the overall project to fall behind. But it is a stream, and it gets reported, and it does hamper it. But we've spent a tremendous amount of time with the individual departments, getting them up to speed, having a look at their documents and analyzing them, and that has taken a lot longer than we had expected.
Thank you, Mr. Theron. Please continue.
So, you've asked already questions about who's responsible for what. So, project leadership clarification, this whole issue of managing those interfaces, it's becoming a little confusing. You got 3 different groups. There's a question of who those groups report to, who's really responsible, who's driving that whole interface development activity. The other thing is the data services activity. There's some confusion about the differences between data migration, data conversion, and data cleansing. Okay, 3 different things. Who's responsible for it? My understanding is that John Marchenko has been tasked with taking responsibility for the data cleansing activity. Question becomes, who's responsible for the data migration and the data conversion activity? That seems to be unclear. And that goes back to that data services senior manager position has never been filled. Okay? Although there are some people that think that John Marchenko is responsible for all data. But mind you, I'm saying what people think and perceive as opposed to who's got the authority and the responsibility.
So then, my question is, so what is he responsible for?
We've had conversations about, he's certainly responsible for the data cleansing effort, because that's a Muni responsibility. It's our data. Only we can change and modify our data. That can't be SAP's responsibility. As far as the migration and the portion of that, that's really going to be an SAP back office kind of responsibility. I will say we've had conversations, and Blaine and Ken are here as well, and I brought this to their attention. We do seem to have a little bit of moving it forward by committee kind of a thing on this particular subject, and may not be as efficient as having somebody completely responsible. Ken has actually, I think, taken a larger responsibility on data. I don't know, running the entire project, I don't know if that's necessarily the most wise decision. So John is on vacation this week. He gets back next week. We'll pick this entire issue up and try to to figure out what is a better strategy to kind of manage all the data. And it may be back office, and it may be this type of thing, but we do need to take a step back and try to consolidate the leadership so we can get particular movement.
Thank you, Mr. Reddington.
A couple of questions. I mean, is it too big of a job for one person to do all three areas?
It's a big job. I don't think, to lead it, I don't think is too much of a job, because the back office, which we keep talking about, they're pretty much responsible for the data migration, data conversion stuff. So I think having having administration over them and actively engaging in them, I think they're going to be doing the vast majority of the work. I think from a lead perspective, it probably wouldn't be too difficult to do that. The data cleansing effort is difficult because it's across all functional departments and utilities, so that's a lot of reaches to be able to get out there and do that. But they all integrate into one another, so you have to be able to. We've had all these meetings in the cleansing and interface with what they're doing in the migration. So that's becoming very clear to us right now, and maybe since we had separated it and we're not getting the movement we need to, we may need to kind of consolidate it back to try to move it forward at a little bit faster pace.
It just, I don't want to get too technical, I guess, but, so data cleansing, is that like one department has budgets of thousands of dollars, and another one doesn't dollars?
It's a situation, let's say you have a vendor and telephone numbers for, 400 of the 10,000 vendors don't have the 907 area code in front of them, or somebody forgot or didn't key in all 9 digits, they only have 7, so you run reports on it, and if you want to bring all that data into SAP, you want that data to be good and accurate when you bring it in. That's cleansing the data.
That's just time.
That is time and resources, which, by the way, we are limited it to begin with because they're doing the regular job. And all that green functional stuff you saw, those are the exact same people who are keeping up all the functional specs, and testing is starting, and all of that in the core system. Those people there are the people that are also trying to help out and cleanse their base data as well. It's a resource allocation situation, and given budgets, you've got limited resources and more importantly, knowledgeable resources to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Thera. Thank you, Mr. Reddington, please.
Okay, the last item on here, which is part of project governance, we just find it odd that there is a voting member of both the functional steering committee and the executive steering committee who is the exact same individual. And that means that they're voting on their own information being passed to them from the functional steering committee. The reporting, this is basically a repeat from last month. It's just a kind of reminder that they're still hanging out there an awful lot of reports that everybody is trying to figure out whether or not standard SAP reports will suffice, and if they do suffice, there's less work. But that's still in the works. Hasn't been resolved. Okay. Project scope management, we want to basically say Alden, he's doing a great job. He's staying on top of changes to the project scope. This is just a recap of what is on the log. There's a project change request log. It's alive and well. It's working. There are 33 of these on the log, 9 of which are blank, which means that there are 24 that are active. They're averaging about 2.5 changes a week. Okay, of the 24 documented PCRs, 18 have been approved, 2 have been rejected, and 4 are ready for review. And the review is the Executive Steering Committee. Of the 24 PCRs, 18 are HCM related. I think the main reason for that is all of the conversation and discussion that went on with CABA and Kronos and all that kind of stuff is why a good heavy number are HCM or payroll related. Most of them have zero impact. However, there are a couple on there, and when you add it together, it's about $200,000. But my understanding is that the administration works very hard with making sure that gets offset by reductions in SAP agreements. So it's not necessarily a net add at this point.
That looks like an improvement over the last month. Is that right?
I'm sorry?
Didn't we have a huge bunch of project change requests?
It's the first time we've actually listed them, okay? So running costs, I think I've let you know that, one of the key people on the side of the team that's been doing an awful lot of the information with regard to the cost has been quite ill. And so we've kind of resolved that, and I think we're now back to getting the information. But interestingly enough, we get some very interesting information, and that is the last 2 weeks. The total running weekly cost is now running at $400,000 and up. So as you start looking out in the future, realize that that's the kind of numbers, because we are adding more developers, there's more activity going on, so for the next few months, you're probably going to see a much higher number.
Right, just one comment, if I may. I mean, it's a whole lot of money, but just a reminder that these are dollars that we've already appropriated. Thank you, please continue.
Want to show you at least the expenses are relatively under control. They seem to be fairly flat as a relationship. Okay, and in terms of the project cost, same kind of thing here. We've got the administrative support to get this report out here. So now you see what the total costs are to date for the project. And so we basically provide you here, this is from the team, this is the total as of 12/31. And we see the months all the way through June, okay? We had earlier said several times that, where are the muni charges? So we're starting to get muni charges now, although I don't understand how we go to a number like that size, but anyway, that's what's out there. So right now, that's what you're looking at in terms of project to date, is expenditures are right at 45 million. Year to date, you're 7.3 round numbers, and for the actual contract to start, the beginning of realization from 4/11, you're a little over, what is that? 4 million? Okay? Yes, sir.
Well, is that May, is that actually February, March, April, and May? At 150,
I can only presume that. I didn't audit it. There was a conversation that people said they were spending an awful lot of time trying to figure out how to get all those charges in and how to allocate the charges, and it could only be a catch-up. That's all I don't know. Okay?
Excuse me, Mr. Thurman, can you ask the question?
The realization to go live contract had $4 million in it for municipal labor to be able to backfill overtime, those kind of things. We've actually, there's still ongoing discussions with the Executive Steering Committee about how that money will be used, and so at this point in time, we are keeping track of the muni resources within Kronos. They put in their information, but the actual spend and how the journal entries have been done to be able to do that have been a challenge, and we're actually still talking about that. We talked about it this week, but half the ESC was not here this week. So I would expect that when they get back in the next week or so, I'm hoping that they will make a decision on the muni charges and how they're going to expense them for at least the first 6 months of the year. It will not make sense, most likely, in accordance with a month-to-month kind of thing. It's going to probably be a big catch-up, which is going to be basically, here's the first 6 months of the year at that point in time. But that has been a challenge, and if you go back to the report that I give you, the 4 million number has never changed since we started, and the reason why I keep leaving it that way is because this decision by the ESC has not been finalized yet. So ZIG is moving along, trying to report on it, but I'm non-committal because my bosses haven't determined how they want to expense it yet. So,
Yeah.
And we have to look at the operating budget and a variety of different things. So we know the 4 million's out there, and we are keeping track of the muni costs, but from a reporting and actual journal entry standpoint, we haven't done many, if at all, hardly any.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Anything else, Mr. Wellington?
So the reporting that you're getting on a monthly basis from the team is focused on this year and focused on the contract and the agreements since 4/11. I'm adding the prior history from prior reports so that you have the full picture ultimately, okay?
Mr. Thurman?
I will just add one comment, because just to help him out here, but he has 45 million there, but that does not count all the invoices that we haven't paid yet. So
And that's the next conversation here.
Don't misinterpret and think that that's the entire amount of money that we owe or anything like that. We are working through back invoices and as far as we can, but there's a few $1 million this what he's reporting here is only what's been put through the system, and we're continually processing invoices which change that number.
What I've tried to do here, below this blue, I mean, this is information that I have generated. In other words, I have taken that weekly run rate information and basically said, this is what's being reported for contractor charges and expenses weekly. I've accumulated those, put them in here by the appropriate month. I've also estimated, using that $4 million number, what a monthly amount would be on an even keel run rate for muni charges. Added those together and say, okay, now let's subtract that from what's actually showing up in PeopleSoft. And basically I'm saying, well, it looks like you're about $500,000 understated. Now, Alden has indicated it's even more than that. But just realize that you're understated. I mean, as he said, that 45 million is not really the number. You may find yourself at the end of this project, if things keep rolling like this, you may find yourself at the end of the project thinking you're finished, and all of a sudden you got some charges. Okay? So that's what we have added for you there for analytical purposes.
I think what we should do in the future, just a side note, maybe schedule this meeting for an hour, because we have like 3 minutes left.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, let me just tell you what's here real quick. On this particular page, we just tried to, we went to their detailed project plan where the estimated hours are for muni resources, specifically in interfaces and data cleansing. Okay? And if you use $50 an hour, just that activity alone is going to eat up $1.6 million of the 4. Okay? We have presented to you the critical success factors. Let me just tell you the new ones. Okay, so the new critical success factors, and we've already alluded to this. You've got 3 IT staffs, you've got 3 CIOs. I'm on page 31, okay? And we've already alluded to the fact that it's going to be difficult for this particular group because you're trying to do everything by committee. Okay, so there's an awful lot of second guessing and armchair quarterbacking going on with the IT folks. And as long as that keeps happening, that could threaten the schedule. And then there's an awful lot of issues with regard to the decisions regarding technology architecture, external service usage, and the tools. That constantly seems to be coming up, and they seem to be all talking and arguing and discussing, and all it does is just simply create a drag. Need to make decisions a little faster. Okay? So we do recommend that you consider a way of solving that, and there are choices here. We basically are suggesting to you the most practical is to establish an enterprise-wide IT board so that they can make strategy and architecture decisions rather than having 3 different groups. Okay, the second one is, we've already talked about it, but just wanted you to realize that, we think that Chapter 2 of avoiding of not implementing a moving target is to sit there and be very careful about having these new systems out there. These upgrades are going to create a requirement for new interfaces or changes to interfaces. That stuff is on the critical path. That stuff is on the critical path. If these upgrades push out into December, you've just clobbered the target date of this project. And that's crucial. So not only should you make sure that that doesn't happen, we need to make sure that you don't have new ones coming up. You do not need new systems upgrading in December that would require an interface to SAP. Now, there's a lot of terms for this, but the one that seems to be rolling around among the team is to establish a freeze. A freeze on new systems that affect SAP. Okay? The last one is, there's a portal that comes with the product. The portal is the way people access information. It is also the way you brand the product. And right now, we're very concerned that there are some suggestions that this project team should wait until right before go live before you put the portal in. We would urge you to put that portal in as fast as you possibly could because it establishes branding. It helps you with your change management, your communications. It helps you with knowledge transfer. Get that portal up there as quickly as you can. Don't wait. The Outlook, Alden has said this, we agree. The functional and development aspects of the software, HCM and Philo, which is human resources and financial aspects, pretty much on course. That's the good news. That's the good news. Now, we've said this. We are very concerned about the project aspects that require Muni staffing in terms of commitment, involvement, and accountability. And those are the areas. Okay? They're struggling to maintain pace with continuing resource shortages, a lot of meeting deferrals, a lot of responsibility confusion, accountability confusion, and team leadership confusion. Questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Stern, would you like to make some brief comments?
No, I think I.
Okay, that's great. Any other comments?
Okay, it's quite a bit when we blow our time budget. I mean, who would be on this team, your enterprise IT board? Do you have something like that?
Well, there are 3 CIOs, as I believe what Zig was referring to. We have a Muni one from MLP, and one from AWU. I believe those 3 for sure would be on that team according to his recommendation. If there's any additional people, I think he's just saying that they've all historically done their own things quite a bit, and with this particular project, maybe it makes sense to kind of consolidate them, but that's an internal power play between those groups that I can't really speak to.
Anything else from anyone? Mr. Delmar?
I just want to follow what you said. It's internal power play.
Well-
They all report to the mayor in one way or another, right?
They do, however, the funding is different. I mean, the utilities get their funding from different areas, so the IT money and allotment and spending and how they spend their money and what they spend it on it can be more determined at their particular level. Just like the Muni has its own separate group. So I think there's a lot of individuality amongst them that they want to have control over. I think what Zig is talking about here is with regards to the SAP project, while this project is in development, as well going forward, there needs to be maybe a little bit more meetings, a lot more consistency amongst those 3 in agreement to make sure there's no backlog or any of these, because as we mentioned, some of the interfaces are responsible for each one of those groups, and if MLP doesn't deliver on their interfaces and everybody else does, we're going to have a problem. So how do you keep all 3 of those units going at the same time, I think is what he's referring to. That doesn't mean that they have to be necessarily engaged in what they're doing on their individual, IT functions that they're doing.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? So we have a representative from MLP here, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is what Zig is referring to happening? Is there coordination?
My understanding that the CIOs do meet informally. What gets discussed, I'm not sure, but I know Terrence has told me that he and Troy and Saul get together and talk, but I don't know what goes on. But could I make one clarification in your presentation, Zig?
Sure.
You had stated that ML&P needs to upgrade our power plan, and we do not. We have already done that. We did that at the beginning of this year. So that's it, and we did that specifically so that we would not impact the SAP project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what the work that they're performing that was approved on Tuesday night, what is that work?
Strictly interface, strictly now getting our PeopleSoft implementation of power plan migrated over to SAP speak, so in layman terms, because you got to change a lot of all the chart fields, yada, yada, yada. The way we send journal entries back and forth has to be redone. So that's what that work. Basically, we have to do the same work in power plan that we're having to do in SAP.
And what we dealt with on Tuesday was something that was brought to our attention.
Thank you.
You're welcome.